live at PRI with broadcaster Vince Welch. Just kind of curious as to what you comment on about how the journalism has changed with the internet coming out.
Well, I think that there are so many opportunities for a multitude of people to put content on the internet, and from a fan's perspective, it's a great opportunity to read other publications around the country. Whether, I live in Indianapolis, but I can read the New York Times, every day if I want, about racing. You can follow different racing series. If I'm living in Indianapolis, I want to follow somebody who's racing in Wisconsin, then I can follow someone who's racing in Wisconsin. I can read all about the sport. It just opens it up to so many more people. I think that's one of the, as many bad things as you can say about the internet, that's one of the great attributes of the internet. It brings people closer to the story and allows people to learn more about a multitude of things that they wouldn't have had an opportunity to learn about otherwise. And in our case, we're talking about racing, and follow more racing and have more stories brought to us front and center.
Considering how short track racing is struggling with attendance to the tracks and everything else, a lot of promoters and owners are saying that the internet-based media is helping kill attendance at the tracks. How do you think about that?
Well, I think popularity doesn't hurt it. I mean, in our day and age, things are so much different today. Just for example, I've got 3 kids. Okay, there was a time when all 3 kids were doing their particular sports and so forth, and we were running left and right, east, west, north, and south every day. Not every weekend, every day. So it was hard. It would be hard for us as a family to take 4, 5, 6 hours out of our day, or maybe longer, to go to a racetrack and see a race. Okay. Now, I had a son who raced, so a lot of times I would be the one going to the racetrack with him, or he would go without any of us. But rarely did his mom or sisters have an opportunity to see him because they were out doing their other thing. So from that perspective, I don't think the internet is hurting racing or race attendance. I think the busyness of people's lives in every facet is what is hurting attendance at not just racetracks, but every type of sporting event. Whether it's basketball or football or baseball stadiums, there are very few athletic teams or tracks that are gaining in attendance, and I think that's not because internet is covering it more. I think that's just because people's lives are so much busier and so much different than they used to be in the 70s, 80s, 90s, maybe, when people were packing those tracks in the stadiums, the way they were back then.
Do you think there's a way that, as journalists, we can kind of help the situation with helping attract new fans, helping to not only keep them informed, but to get them to come to the tracks?
Writing interesting stories, finding, to me, I'm not so much interested in so-and-so led 8 or 9 laps, or led 20 laps, or led 100 laps, or led every lap. I'm more interested in knowing what makes that guy special. Why did Ryan Hunter-Reay cry in victory lane after he won the Indianapolis 500 this year? Or why did, my first Indy 500 victory lane, I did 15 Indy 500s, but the first time I interviewed the winner in victory lane was Dan Weldon. He cried like a baby. He cried because at the beginning of the season he didn't have a ride, so he felt blessed to just have a ride, and then he ended up winning it. It was also, his mom was very ill with Alzheimer's, was not able to be there. That meant so much to him to be able to win. He was so emotional. That, to me, is so much more reason to be interested in Dan Weldon than the fact that he won the race, even if it was the greatest race, the Indy 500. Right. And then, we lost Dan, a short while later. But to me, it's not, did you win the race, but what's the backstory? And I think those are the things that journalists can do to make the drivers more entertaining, to make the fan want to go out and root for that driver. And then, when they're rooting for that driver, then they're at the racetrack.
With a lot of that, though, with the rivalries on the short track, because I'm a short track kind of guy.
Absolutely.
You get the beating and banging and the fights in the pits and all that kind of thing, and you kind of walk a gray line of how far do you go to perpetuate the myth of the story.
Yeah, but I think that, to me, the most, and I'm just speaking from my own perspective of the way I like to read things and the types of stories I like to read, I don't want to read about, I'll read about the fight, for instance, but what caused the fight? What's the backstory? That's been brewing for a while. What was it? Or the beating and the banging. Man, these guys have been beating and banging since participants, you know, win? Why are they beating and banging? You know, and I think those are the things that make it just more interesting than just beating and banging. Now, there's a difference between a game story, if you will, or a story that's just covering the race, and then a column, which is, you know, maybe going more in depth about the whys and the hows and the backstory. So, you know, I understand that they serve different purposes, but I do think that's the great thing about the internet, is the internet provides more opportunity to write more stories, and to, you know, whether it's your site or, you know, Associated Press or whatever the site may be, there's so much more opportunity now to put more content out there because the web can handle it. Whereas a particular newspaper, you know, it's got a certain amount of stories it can handle because they've got a certain amount of space.
Well, that's the great thing about my site, is I control the entire length of the content. So if I want whatever doing. That being said, with the track owners and promoters kind of on the fence as to how we do things, you know, do you think it's a responsibility of the media to be a little more cooperative with them and work along with them to help them promote through the stories?
You know, I don't think the media has to be the PR company for anybody, whether it's the track, the driver, whatever the case may be, the team. But I always like to say, hey, help me help you. Help me tell your story. You know, if you're going to make it really hard on me to get the information that I need to properly tell your story, don't come back and complain later when your story wasn't told the way you wanted it to be told. You know, if you know, I can help you. I can talk about some positive stories about your racetrack that maybe will draw some more people to it. But help me. You know, if you got a great idea or you got a great story, you know, you do a little work to help me help you. And you still got to write a fair. You know, that doesn't mean you don't write a fair piece. It just means that you're having help getting your bases covered. And if I'm promoting a racetrack, the guy that I'm going to have on speed dial is the guy at the local paper or the local website that's writing about stuff that's happening at my place. You know, I want them to respect what I do, and I want them to understand the importance of what we do and why it's important, and why it's important to get 7,000 fans at our racetrack instead of just 4,000 fans, and why the drivers on the track are worth coming out to see. And you know, but I think that takes work, and a lot of times people don't want to work; they just want the end result, and that's just not the way it is in this. That's not the way it is in this day and age. Yeah, I mean, it just can't be that way. You know, it's too hard today. You know, there's too much competition. You know, it's just like we were talking about television ratings. There's 150,000 channels now, where when I was a kid there were 4. So, you know, yeah, the ratings are going to be different, and the competition is different. You know, it's like a race between 4 guys or a race between 40 guys. You know, it's going to be a lot harder to win that race with 40 guys than it is with 4.
I appreciate your time and your insights.
Yeah.
Thank you.